Hello, everybody. Good morning. To all of you who are celebrating, let me start by saying Shana Tova, Happy New Year, and wishing you a great Rosh Hashanah. Marlene, thank you so much for your very kind words, for your friendship, and for your leadership. You've been a great ally, along with everybody at the Southern New Jersey Development Council over the past now almost 6 years in office. And thank you for hosting me so graciously this morning. I was thinking, I don't do a whole lot of events. I'm not sure, I should ask Mark why, but we should, I don't do a lot of events at resorts, but I was thinking coming down here, it's a little bit of a historic treasure. When it opened in 1978, I believe, people lined up apparently for hours before my late and dear friend, Governor Brendan Byrne, cut the ribbon. And it ushered in, at that time, a new stage of nightlife and activity on the East Coast, never mind just in Atlantic City. And I was thinking, I think the resorts story is a good example of the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship that has always defined South Jersey. Whether it's the creation of the cultivated blueberry in the Pine Barrens, or whether it's all of those family-owned shops and businesses that line the Jersey Shore. And looking out here today and just looking through the list of folks who are going to be here this morning, I'm reminded of just how important the Southern New Jersey Development Council's mission is, not just to South Jersey, but to our state's future. You bring people together, and again, Marlene, I thank you for your leadership, but to all of you, you bring folks together across industries and sectors, and by doing so, you unleash economic growth, as I say, not just for South Jersey, but for all of New Jersey. I could list and shout out a lot of you by name, but I'm going to forget somebody if I do that. So as groups, I want to just thank the legislators, particularly the bipartisan Rockin' Group that just had a panel up here, the county and local officials, whether you be commissioners, mayors, or other. The resorts team, I mentioned Mark and his team, thank you for hosting us. Our dear Casino Commission members, federal officials with us today, representatives of higher education, and I want to end my acknowledgments with an apology to the UFC fight members in the group discussion after me, Messrs. Muller, Duhane, refereed by Dworkin, all good friends, and I wish you all the best. I was a little surprised not to see a steel cage up here. Back to higher ed. I mentioned higher ed, and you all know this, but Stockton and Atlantic Cape operate two wonderful campuses here in Atlantic City, and they provide a vital service to the community. Though I've got to say, if I were a student, I said this to the leadership, especially at Stockton, I don't think I would get much studying done with the beach just outside my window. But that really also, at the same time, speaks to the magic of the Jersey Shore. You get, on the one hand, everyday essential life, but you get it with a dash of paradise. And honestly, I think that description applies not just to Atlantic City, but to all of South Jersey. And as it says in the Southern Jersey Development Council's tagline, down here, we have 3,700 square miles of opportunity. And if we want to seize, and I mean truly seize, those thousands of miles of opportunity, then we need to continue to invest in South Jersey's future together. Frankly, it would be the height of insanity to pass that opportunity up. Because here in South Jersey, we have it all. And you know this better than I. Agriculture, healthcare, energy, innovation, education, tourism, on and on. I mean, look no further than right here in Atlantic City. We just wrapped up another banner summer down the shore, and it would have been almost unthinkable just a few years ago at the height of the coronavirus pandemic. But look at what happened these past few months. Our casinos were booming, our beaches were bustling, and our boardwalks up and down the shore, our wooden main streets, if you will, They were brimming with families and visitors, not just from all over Jersey or America, but from around the world. And I want to take this opportunity to both acknowledge the loss of our extraordinary Lieutenant Governor Sheila Y. Oliver, who spent so much of her time working with the leadership here in Atlantic City. But I also want to give a shout out to our new Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of State, Tahisha Way. Yeah. I say that because Tahisha has served as Secretary of State since the very beginning of our administration. And as Secretary of State, among other things, and that includes elections and overseeing our census, which is both of which are huge deals, she has done a phenomenal job supporting and strengthening South Jersey's tourism economy. In fact, this year, New Jersey's tourism economy is expected to generate about $48 billion in economic activity, and that is the biggest haul ever. And I do not say this to pat ourselves on the back, because we all know there's still, across the whole range of our interests, a lot of work to do. But that being said, New Jersey has come a long way in the past, now almost 6 years, and we're turning things around as we said we would for our economy. If you think back to the last administration, both in Trenton and in Washington, and I'm not being political when I say this, it's just a matter of fact, during those days, New Jersey was on the backslide. Our leaders thought small, and no surprise, when you think small, you get small results. And one of our biggest missteps back then was underinvesting in New Jersey's greatest resources of all, our people, our families, our small businesses. And that is exactly why, since the moment we came into office, our top priority has been thinking big about our state's future. And together, with all of your help, we've been investing in that future in a big way. For instance, over the past nearly 6 years, this is one example of many I could give you, New Jersey's Economic Development Authority, led by the incomparable Tim Sullivan, has dramatically expanded financial support for our small businesses. We've approved, just to give you one comparison, grants and loans for nearly 3,200 businesses. That is a 7-fold increase since 2018. Not 7%, not 70%, 7 times the amount of grants and loans that we put on the street 5 years ago. And as we've made these investments, we have, not surprisingly, emerged as a top 5 state for small business growth. And that growth has not just benefited business owners, but the workers that they employ as well. And compared to our peer states, this is a statistic that is a mouthful, but trust me, it's a leading indicator of what will come several years hence. New Jersey ranks near the top when it comes to new business applications for firms that have the highest potential for hiring employees and making payroll. So there's a difference between just a company, a business that's a startup, but a startup with real potential to have a workforce and sustain itself. So looking ahead, I believe our responsibility is now to sustain the growth that we have unleashed in recent years, so every community in New Jersey, North, Central, and South, benefits. And I think our economic strategy can really be boiled down into 3 simple parts. Investing in our state's talent and emerging industries so we can continue pioneering the innovations of tomorrow. I was just on back and forth with the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. They rebranded themselves, you may have seen yesterday. That's a great example of a company that's planted its flag in New Jersey 137 years ago and are still here and employing thousands of folks in this state. We need the next generation of J&Js to be in this state. Secondly, rebuilding our state's infrastructure so we can support a world-class economy and create good-paying, in this state, overwhelmingly union jobs. And finally, attracting the world's top minds by offering families a better quality of life that they can find anywhere else in the United States. So if I may, just for a couple of minutes, let me explain a little bit how we think we're bringing this economic vision to life, not just generally in New Jersey, but specifically here in South Jersey. First, as you all know, the region has massive potential to be the home base for our clean energy future, not limited to, but particularly with offshore wind. In fact, South Jersey is already reaping the benefits of building out this brand new industry with hundreds of jobs being created in manufacturing and construction and tens of thousands of more potential jobs on the way. And as I mentioned earlier, almost overwhelmingly union jobs. For instance, and I could give you many examples, in Salem County, we're in the process of completing phase one of the first purpose-built wind port in the entire country. And between that wind port and other offshore wind projects, whether they be in Paulsboro or here in Atlantic City or Ocean City, we're inching closer and closer to our goal of creating 11,000 megawatts of clean energy by the year 2040. And 2040 is not that far off. That's enough, you may ask. How much energy is that? It's enough energy to power 4.5 million homes. Our investments in wind energy, I think, are the ultimate win-win-win. We're going to combat climate change. And by the way, we're the most exposed state to sea level rise and climate change of any state in America. We're going to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. And thirdly, we're going to create, as I mentioned, thousands of good-paying, overwhelmingly union jobs. We're also making good progress on that second point when it comes to rebuilding New Jersey's infrastructure, which is a priority both for businesses and families alike. Just a few weeks ago, I was here in Atlantic City to sign the Boardwalk Preservation Fund into law. It created $100 million of a fund that will support the repair and renovation of boardwalks all along the shore. And by the way, a quick plug, shore communities can apply right now through the Department of Community Affairs to receive some of that funding. dca.nj.gov. dca.nj.gov. Just make sure you submit your proposal by the deadline, which is at the end of next month, October 31st. So our goal with the Boardwalk Preservation Fund is to continue attracting visitors and consumers to destinations like Atlantic City and other communities for decades to come. And with this funding, we're going to make our boardwalks at the same time more durable in the face of what we know will be climate change. That's good news. There's even better news. That $100 million did not come from the pockets of our state and local taxpayers. It came from the federal government. And on that note, may I also mention two more programs that we recently launched, a total of $80 million, also with federal monies, the Urban Investment Fund and the Atlantic City Economic Foundations Fund. So with both of those investments, we're going to revitalize in the first instance our urban areas, beginning with Camden, and, bless you, and we're going to create new, we don't miss a thing up here, by the way. We're going to create, easy now, create new economic opportunities right here in Atlantic City. And in doing so, we're going to build a stronger economic foundation for South Jersey's future. Let me riff for 30 more seconds on infrastructure. A couple of other things, one of which is happening, two of which I want to make happen. The first one that's happening is the Walter Rand Transit Center in Camden is getting completely redone. That'll probably take 5 to 10 years. We started it a couple of years ago. That will be a game changer, not just for the residents of Camden, but any folks who have a commute in and around or through Camden. Two other things that I still want to get done. The light rail connection between Glassboro and Camden is a big priority to unleash the funds that we need for that. I appreciate the applause, but we're not there yet. But I want to make sure you know that I'm going to die trying to get that one on the boards. And the other one is, just by the nature of South Jersey, we've mentioned this many times before, densifying, for lack of a better word, the bus routes in South Jersey. You know the part of the state better than I do, you know that would be a game changer for residents in a whole variety of communities. And then that third pillar I wanted to just spend a second on, which is we're also taking steps to attract the world's top talent to New Jersey by making sure that we remain the best state to raise a family. Whether it's our best in the nation public education system, or to our first in the nation record on public safety, and not to mention the peace of mind that your fundamental freedoms are protected in New Jersey without question. We have established ourselves as the most family-friendly state in the entire country. I've said this to you before, every state has a bumper sticker. Some of them are you don't pay state taxes, or we have warm weather in the winter. Ours is very simply the #1 state in America to raise a family. And almost everything we do drives into that bumper sticker. We're also at the same time taking strides to ensure our workers can outcompete anyone by expanding support for vocational training and apprenticeship programs. One example right here in Atlantic City, down the street in the Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall, where the Casino Reinvestment Development Authority has opened a new training facility for painters. Or another example, the Wind Power Ready program, a partnership between Rowan College of South Jersey and Orsted. They're working together to prepare our state's residents for careers as wind turbine technicians. And that's just one of many training programs being introduced in a bunch of counties. Atlantic right here, Salem, Gloucester, Camden come to mind, to give our neighbors a leg up in pursuing a career in offshore wind, especially women and persons of color. And really, there's a simple rationale for expanding programs that train and support working New Jerseyans, and that is the fact that New Jersey is the quintessential middle-class state. After all, it was the middle class that helped build New Jersey in the first place, and it will be the middle class that will be at the forefront of building our future. So the more we invest in our middle class, the more money those folks will put back into the economy, and that is a virtuous cycle that will lead us to a better future for every family. And as we build that future, I know that we can count on the Southern New Jersey Development Council's continued partnership. You have stood up for, I know organizations like this up and down the state. You all stand tall for standing up for every community in South Jersey, from Cape May to Chesterfield and everybody in between, for more than half a century. And together, we will make sure that South Jersey leads the next half century of innovation and prosperity. Where'd Marlene go? Will you permit me another couple of minutes to riff on a couple of topics that I was noodling on last night? A couple of thoughts. One, to give you a sense of our mindset of how we've approached the economy. We inherited, I think, a broken state in many respects. So in one respect, we're in a relative comparison of where we were versus where we are. And we are obsessed with that. And we look at metrics, whether it's the size of the surplus in our budget, whether we're getting upgrades or downgrades, happily upgrades from rating agencies. We look at our state's revenues. We look at the birth of new industries that didn't exist 6 years ago, like offshore wind. So in one respect, we're comparing ourselves to where we were. And that's a journey that we're on together. We're not patting ourselves on the back. We've made an enormous amount of progress. We are who we said we would be. We're fixing this place. But importantly, there's not only more progress yet to make, but we have to make sure when we walk out of here in 2+ years and hang up our cleats, that New Jersey's on a strong foundation and that we never slip back to those bad old days. The second comparison that we make is how are we doing against other states, and being clear-eyed about what you can control and what you can't control. I'll talk about Washington in a minute, but the example that probably is the best one of what we can't control is a war in Europe. That's not something that any of us saw coming or wanted. But let's be obsessed with the things that we can control. putting funding where our words are, investing in those three pillars that I mentioned in my remarks. And we're obsessed with monitoring how we're doing versus other American states. I'm a recovering banker, and in the stock market, there's the notion of systematic risk and unsystematic risk. And for those of you who aren't in that milieu, systematic risk is the risk you take with the market, the stuff you can't control. Was the Dow Jones up or down? Did the Fed raise interest rates or cut them? Was there a war in Europe that led to a supply chain challenge? It's the general risks of being in the business, in my case now, of being the chief executive of a state. The unsystematic risk is the stuff you can control. And that's where we are obsessed in comparing ourselves with other states. And the news lately on that front is unequivocally, across the board, really good. Everything from the hard stuff, CNBC ranked us as the biggest improving state in which to do business. We're top 3 to both live and work recently by another independent survey. This week, we got ranked in the top 5 happiest states in America. Go figure, I'll take it. When you look at those, and there are many others, we've been upgraded 6 or 7 times by the rating agencies. In the prior administration, we were downgraded 11 times. So we're not only, to put a capstone on that, we not only compare ourselves where we were to where we are as a state, but also where we are as compared to other American states. A word about Washington, Marlene, if I may, and it's a tale of 2 cities for us. The good news is things like the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the largest infrastructure project right now in America is the Gateway program, building 2 more tunnels up north under the Hudson River. That's all good news for us. I don't think we've got the energy price profile that we want or will have, or the amount of land, perhaps, that we would need to build a big fab production facility. But because we're an innovation economy, we're going to get an enormous amount out of that CHIPS Act. The IRA is largely a climate change act. It will propel a lot of the stuff that we're already doing. And as I mentioned, the bipartisan infrastructure law for the nation's most densely populated state is a huge boon for us. And most of those monies have not yet been spent anywhere, but in specific in New Jersey. That's the good news. The bad news is the self-inflicted wounds of an incapable Congress of getting comprehensive immigration reform done, where the elements of that are clear as we're sitting here. It's this wash, rinse, repeat impeachment cycle. It's not being able to raise the debt levels. It's the threat of shutdowns. None of that is good for America or for New Jersey. And that feeds into that systematic risk that is largely beyond our control. I just stepped down as the chair of the National Governors Association, and I'm still an active member. We have tried like heck to give air cover to Congress and ultimately the administration to get a bipartisan immigration reform done. The elements of that are clear. Whether we like it in my party or not, we're going to have to secure the border, period. Secondly, we're going to have to find a pathway to status that is acceptable for the 15 to 20 million folks who are already in America illegally. And thirdly, we're going to have a really smart, legal, responsible, jobs-oriented, economic-oriented, legal immigration system. It's not that hard, but you'd never believe that looking at it from the outside. And I'll leave you lastly, Marlene, if I can. People ask me all the time, what's my economic outlook? And for me, at least, it is quite sanguine. In other words, this notion that we've been able to come through this extraordinary period of a pandemic, enormous federal stimulus, supply chain challenges, a war in Europe, inflation, the Federal Reserve raising rates at almost, not quite, but almost at a historic, unprecedented level. to be where we are as a country, frankly, as a globe, in our respective economies is pretty remarkable. And I think here's my only, I don't want to leave you on a down note, I think we are overweighting in our probability crystal ball selves as we look out over the next 12 to 18 months. I think we're overweighting the soft landing and underweighting what I fear will be some amount of persistent inflation. Not rampant, but I don't think it's going to go away as quickly or as starkly as many now expect. And if that's true, we could have a little bit of something less than a soft landing in our economy, which would mean the Fed would probably continue to raise rates. My guess is a couple of more times. That means it'll continue to be more expensive to buy a home or to buy a car or whatever else you want to buy. I think it probably means unemployment trends up somewhat. Again, this is America, not specific to us. So again, I think we're generally in a good place. Our revenues have stayed about as what we've projected through the middle of September, which is today. Not exactly on target, but pretty much on target. That's a good metric for us in real time. You know, we get revenues daily, so we know what the sales tax generated yesterday. So we know that's a real-time sense of consumption and people's confidence in the economy. So I think we're in a decent place, but I think if there's a risk, the risk is on the downside. Not that the roof's going to fall in, but that we're going to have more inflation than we'd like. The Fed will be raising rates more than cutting them. Unemployment probably gets nicked. General economic outlook gets nicked. Again, not the roof falling in, but on the margin, a little bit of concern that we're underweighting a more challenging future. With that, again, we're going to do everything we can with your great partnership and support to make sure that no matter what the environment is, that New Jersey is poised to outperform. And I'll leave you with this other theory of how we think about this. We want to perform through a cycle and generate, this is another way of putting the point about outperformance in a different context. We want to generate more revenues at the state level than we otherwise would have through a cycle, recognizing economic cycles go kind of like this, again, than we otherwise would have with the old economy. We try to keep our expenses under wrap. We have fewer employees at the state meaningfully than we did when I put my hand on the Bible in January of 2018. We don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish with that, by the way. We'll put a ton more investments into technology and innovation so that we're able to do more with less. But again, we want to be able to generate a better profile than we otherwise would have. And that gives us latitude, folks, that New Jersey hasn't had for a long time. Remember, we used to be a AAA bond-rated state, and we're no longer, but we're on the climb back. And if you look at those rating agencies' decisions, or you look at these other objective third-party polling of how Jersey's doing, you get some amount of confidence that we'll be able to do just what I said, not just outperform other states, but outperform what New Jersey would have performed as had we just kept the old economy and the old level of investments. So with that, thanks, Marlene, for letting me riff a little bit. God bless you all. God bless the great state of New Jersey and the United States of America.